Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Straight Outta BS podcast. Thanks for tuning in again. Sorry about my absence. I've just been honestly pretty depressed and dealing with a lot of stuff in my life. But I'm back, taking it slow, and still doing the interviews. And I think I'm going to be hopefully putting out the third part to my new series here sometime soon. Getting back into a good place mentally, so. There's that. I want to do a moment of silence for the person still suffering with addiction, with problems, anything. So on the count of three, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And I just wanted to personally thank Janine Miller. She's the first person that has signed up for my, what was it? I think it was Patreon, yeah, for my Patreon account. If you want to help support the podcast, the link is in the description of this video, or it will be in the description of this video. So feel free to do that. I also have merch. Just want to let you guys know. And thank you for all the support. Thank you for continuing to like my videos. Really helps with the like button because YouTube has been going through, from what I've been hearing, it's like right now, it really matters to hit the like button because the algorithms are kind of messed up, essentially, on YouTube, from what I hear. So anyways, if you like the video, leave a comment, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Really appreciate it. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you went, what school you went to, and when.
Hi, I'm Lany Young. I went to Cedu Middle School in Running Springs in 97 through 99. I also went to Ascent up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, twice during that I was there.
One second, you were cutting out a little bit. So what was the one in Idaho?
I'm sorry, Ascent.
Ascent, okay.
Which is in Coeur d'Alene, was typically associated with BCA, Boulder Creek Academy, and Rocky Mountain Academy, but Cedu, the Running Springs location, I'm sorry, I should have clarified, the middle school, Cedu Middle School and Cedu High School were in Running Springs, California.
Okay.
A lot of the other schools, Cedu affiliated schools, were up in Idaho, close to the Ascent campus, but we were down in California.
So it was Cedu, but a different location, essentially.
Correct. And I believe that the middle school was unique as far as being one of the only middle school, age groups around, at least at that time, being accepted at 11 years old versus a lot of the other programs were taking on high school age students.
Yeah. Did you get transported, or did your parents bring you up there? What happened?
I was transported. I was, I don't know if you were asking for the story or if you just.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was transported from home. Originally, I was woken up from my home. I live in Wisconsin, and I was 11. And I had known a little bit about the school. I had been kicked out of some middle schools in my area, and I knew that I was kind of, we all know what I don't know. I didn't mean to say we all know. I was aware of what was going on in my life and that I was kind of walking a tightrope. And But I was woken in the middle of the night, and there were a couple of, from what I found out later, were off duty or private police officers or some sort of military, some uniformed, but they were off. They weren't uniformed at the time. Very frightened, having these men in my room. My mom was crying. My stepdad was there. My stepdad molested me my whole life, so his presence was not very much appreciated. My parents, instead of leaving me to be transported alone, they hired or they booked a private jet, and they went with me with the gentleman, with the escorts. So if it's common term for everyone, but we call them body snatchers at Cedu. That's what it felt like. And my mom and my stepdad and the gentleman, and we flew out to California, and it was a long ride. I mean, from Wisconsin directly out to California is probably a couple hours. And I remember being very upset, and my defense as a child was defiance. And I remember being, I think that my mom was telling me on the airplane that the reason that they had to bring these additional gentlemen was because of how erratic I was, and it was my fault that, they had to take these extreme measures. And I remember specifically, and I'm not trying to throw my mom under the bus. I'm a mom now, and, I look at things differently, but she said, if I were a doctor, I would have killed you at birth. She was so disgusted with me and my behavior at that's where she was. And I speak to that only because I believe that my parents were preyed upon. I was a sick child. I don't think that everybody has that experience, but that's down the road topic. But we arrived, and I was taken up to the top of the San Bernardino Mountains, and I was dropped off there and left. The first time I was physically restrained by anybody was when my mother tried to leave me, and I tried to hold on to her, and they, forcefully ripped my arms off of her, and then held me down. I want to say, it felt like forever, but it was a pretty significant restraint. If you've ever been restrained. And like I said, I was like 11. So, and then I was also transported, body snatched, both of the times that I was taken to Ascent. So I was taken from Cedu, from the dorms, up to Ascent. And those people, were not, whereas I believe my parents sought out a professional company, with qualified body snatchers. These people Cedu hired to take us to Ascent were not qualified. They were just Joe Blow down the road. People who were rough around the edges and didn't care and would rough up a kid and take them and not care that they cried for hours and hours and threw up in the back of the car. And this is, let's see, so this was 90, 97, 98, plenty before life changed. And when I was taken up there, I don't remember where we got on the airplane, but at some point we traveled on the airplane, and I had been handcuffed the whole time. I had already run away. Actually, I think that's why I went to Ascent. I was yelling bomb in the airport because of the way that somebody would save me from this experience. And instead of being taken seriously, uh, my handlers were able to convince them that I was just crazy or whatever, and they hog-tied me and put me on a luggage carrier and just pushed me down, the airport and put me on the plane. And there was a air marshal on the airplane, just happened to be, it wasn't like it is nowadays, I think, when you fly. And very humbling experience.
Okay. Do you as a kid, were you essentially acting out because of what was happening to you with the molestation, or like what were you doing, like, to get, because you said that you said your own words that you said you were like troubled or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I was diagnosed bipolar when I was probably 27. And I don't know when. I do think that I was pretty chemically imbalanced as a child, like just genetically. Um, I so and they tossed those things around when I was younger, because of my, like you said, the outbursts, which were related to the abuse. Because when you're at home and you're abused and you live with your abuser and you have other parents and other people who are also living with the abuser, um it's difficult to deal with. And I think, piggybacking on that, whatever it was that was chemically imbalanced with me genetically, made me emotionally, like, I just didn't know how to regulate my emotions. My dad is passed, but he was severely bipolar. My brother is severely bipolar. I do believe in that I have some genetic predisposition. But I have a family of codependent, uh, enmeshed people, and my mother chose to ignore a lot of really obvious things that were, in her face about what was going on. And I, like I said, I had been kicked out of some schools, so I knew that I was on the fence. I knew that I was kind of walking a line, and the reasons I had been kicked out of school were um, ultimately related to the abuse. Because of the sexual abuse, I was having bladder infections constantly. So I was wetting my pants at school because I wasn't telling anybody. I didn't know. So I wasn't telling anybody about the infections. So I wasn't receiving antibiotics or any treatment. And so I would have an accident at school, and I was like probably fourth or fifth grade, and would sweatshirt around my waist, or whatever. And eventually you're the smelly kid in class who smells like pee. And I was a very strong-willed child. And so I think where most kids would maybe just wilt away or be just kind of bullied, I just ran away from school. I was just like, F you guys, and I just ran away, and I found an abandoned construction site, and I just hung out in there until the police came. And so I was kicked out of that school because they were like, this is highly abnormal, especially for Wisconsin. It's a very conservative state. Kids don't do that around here. And then I was, that continued to happen at other schools where I was provoked with something small, and I had no ability to control my reactions. because of multiple reasons. So I was also unregulated at home. So I was fighting with my siblings, my parents. The police would be called because of the violence between my stepfather and myself. And they would have a 5150, which, if you're familiar with, is a police intervention where you're legally, taken and hospitalized.
It's also how they get people in. It's also the loophole that they're using to get people into the conservatorships a lot of the time too.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. My father was in conservatorship for a long time before he passed, and you get a record essentially, and at 8 years old, I had a record. I'd been in and out of the psych hospitals. I'd been bounced around to schools. And so that's when my psychiatrist, to be honest, I'd have to ask my parents who contacted who, but that was about the point when somebody got in touch with my parents and said, Delaney needs more. Why don't we send her away? She's got to get out of the house. We've got to find a program for her. And that's when the therapeutic boarding school concept was introduced. And then I think I was kicked out of like one more school. And then that was, I think they felt maybe the last resort.
Okay. Did you try?
A little different? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut
Go
you
ahead.
off.
Go ahead.
The point yet where I was doing drugs and I
weren't doing bad, like you weren't doing really like actually bad shit. Like you were just.
I played with Barbies. I was prepubescent, very prepubescent. I didn't get my period till I was at Cedu and I was like 14. So very young, very immature, very sheltered. I went to school with kids who grew up in LA and I'm from Wisconsin. And, it was, Cedu was a unique experience, and it was its own subculture too, and I was different, but I was also 11, and even the kids at the middle school were older than I was. And I was a young 11, I mean, believed in Santa and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Did you try telling your parents at any point about what was happening to you by your stepfather? Or that's who it was, right? Your stepfather?
yeah, actually, I did. When I was I transferred, when I got to 6th grade, I had a female friend. And one night I spent the night at her house, and her older brother was in high school, maybe even like 18, came into her room, and he was really drunk and on drugs, and essentially, assaulted both of us in enough of a way that she confessed that had been happening with him for a while. And I confided about my stepdad, and we made a pact that we were going to go tell the counselor at school. And we went, and she chose not to come forward, but I did. And the counselor, I guess the way, because she didn't echo my story, and because I'm not sure, they questioned me. They brought my stepdad, my mother, and 2 police officers in, all at the same time, into the counselor's office to interview me about it. And I was so scared of my stepdad and my mother, and the fact that my friend had bailed on me, and the fact that they were talking about my body parts. And so I said, you're right, I lied. I lied, and this never happened. And so I was kicked out of that school as well because they thought I was a sociopath. So I tried, and then that was actually shortly after that was the first time I attempted to take my life. It wasn't really anything big or severe. I was too young to really, I think, make a very serious plan. But to me, it was serious, and it was wanted and very intentional. And I was, of course, hospitalized and, treated for that. But yes, I did try. And it's taken, I still don't think my mom wants to admit it and wants to acknowledge it. We'll talk about it, reference it in kind of passing. But he's still my stepdad.
Yeah. It's really fucked up and interesting to me. I wonder why they would even bring you and your abuser in the same fucking room.
Right?
Right? Why would you even bring them in the same room? Even if there's a chance that it was made up, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would you bring them in the same room? That's like literally bringing an assault victim and the person that assaulted them, or a serial killer and somebody that he tried to kill in the same room. You don't do that. So I don't know. That to me is really weird. You know what I mean?
And I'd like to give credit to the fact that it was 1996, but I agree it was highly inappropriate, and I think it also, I was labeled for being, I think at that point, or at that grade, I think that was 7th grade, I had already missed months of school for hospitalizations or something, so school knew that I was a little nutty. And so I think that was their approach. They didn't take me serious from the get-go. They didn't have any trauma-informed care. This is way back when, and I pray that it's different now. I have kids, and I just hope that it's not like that anymore. Regardless of somebody's standing or label or anything, if somebody, that should always be, it should never be a grain of salt. It should never be taken with a grain of salt, ever.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was raped when I was 7 by my babysitter, and essentially not the same thing happened, but the same action was taken essentially, where the police went and interviewed him and his sister, and he just said, no, I didn't do it, obviously. And then they're like, oh, okay, I guess you didn't do it. We're not gonna. And then they asked his sister, has he done anything like this? Has he acted weird like this to you before? And she was like, no. And they're like, oh, well, guess he didn't. Guess he didn't do it then. They didn't even pursue it. And then I never really felt like my parents believed me. Yeah, they called the cops and all that, but they didn't protect me like I wanted them to protect me. Honestly, flat out, I wanted them to be like, no, motherfucker, stay the fuck away from my kid. Da, 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 da. Like, I'm pressing charges. Like, fuck that. So I don't know. That's what I'd do if it was my kid. I'd be like, no, I'm not gonna let you just. No, I'm gonna get money out of you. I'm gonna get everything out. Like, your reputation's gonna be ruined. All that. Like,
yeah,
I'm not.
Sorry that happened to you, and that you felt. I wish that somebody wanted to kill somebody or wanted, I don't want somebody
to protect you. Yeah.
To be like, hold me back,
Yeah.
hold me back from doing this crime because you violate, I had a dad. He's dead now, and I don't want to speak badly on his name, but he didn't do shit, that's a bummer. When you're a kid, people who stick up for you, that sucks.
Yeah, for sure. So I can definitely relate. Okay, so so you first went to Cedu, then you went to Ascent, then you went, I just want to get the timeline right. You went to Cedu, then you went to Ascent, then you went to where after Ascent?
Cedu.
Back to Cedu.
back to Ascent for a second tour,
Oh,
and then
damn.
back to Cedu, and then home.
So you went to Cedu 3 times, Ascent twice, and then back home.
Right.
But
Well,
not in that order. Not in that order.
yeah, the Cedu was all one time, and then from Cedu they sent me as punishment up to Ascent.
Okay.
So I would go to Ascent for like a couple of months, do my and
Okay,
then
so it was like a punishment where they sent you to do your punishment.
yes, the boot camp.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're the same. It's the same. It's part of the same corporate or whatever. Like it's part of the same school, but
It
it's
was
different.
Brown.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. One issued punishment and one like just ran the school. Okay.
Right. See,
Okay.
Ascent, a wilderness. That's how they
Okay.
parents was it was this wilderness excursion, little intense kind of time out for you to get, intense, get in touch with the nature and touch your roots and stuff. And it was just more money, more extortion, more abuse, more.
Okay, now that you say it like that, I went to Wilderness too when I was at Spring Creek Lodge, so now I get completely what you're saying.
Yep.
Okay. For a second, I thought it was like they beat you over there, and then they like issued punish. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, no. Well, it was all about abuse. I mean, it was
Yeah.
it was claiming to be something, but it was really all about work, labor, and PT. And I mean, I saw somebody's get their arms snapped while they were being restrained, and they were in a cast, and they were still made to cut wood manually with a big saw. And they eventually went to the orthopedics, and they weren't, their arm is like, to this day is like damaged. And I, just quick story about the kind of things they did. They would there was something called a burrito, and if you misbehaved, or if they thought you were a flight risk, even though you were in the middle of nowhere, they took your boot at night. They took your
shoelaces. They
there
took
was
our shoelaces.
no, if you were misbehaved, this was all about embarrassment and degradation and humiliation. They would make you get into your sleeping bag, which were the mummy sleeping bags. I don't know if you're familiar. They're like really tight around you, and they just kind of have a face portion, because it was, Idaho up near Canada, and it was winter. And then they would wrap you in tarp and then bungee cord you into it. So you were physically restrained in a burrito, is what they call it, like I said. And they would put you in the middle of the camp for everyone to laugh at and taunt. You wouldn't be undone to go to the bathroom. You obviously would be fed at some point. It wasn't anything that horrific, but that would be, I mean, that was the kind of punishments. That's what we'd be doing. We'd be digging stumps for no reason. Just dig a stump, or dig a hole on this side of camp and carry all the dirt to the other side of camp. Or, rock for rock, just one rock in your hand, carry that to the other side of camp. And the whole time you have counselors like boot camp who are yelling at you, your parents fucking hate you, you dirty slut, dope addict, like whatever your issues were, just throwing it in your face. You couldn't, male and female were separated. You were called otters and tatankas. You weren't even called human beings or by your name. You couldn't look at each other. You couldn't talk at night. You lived in teepees. I mean, just really about abuse and humiliation. And then somewhere thrown in there, they managed to, I don't know, and I have to think that it was like some sort of sick things with the counselors that they just wanted to hear about you, about your life. But we'd have these like groups, they call them raps, and you'd have to sit and, you know, talk about all your embarrassing life experiences, and then other people had to tell on each other. You had to rat on each other to not get in trouble, and you had to give other people really shitty advice and call them shitty names, and to not have the focus be put on you and to not be punished and abused yourself. And the staff was just, you know, especially cruel and malicious up at Ascent. I don't know why.
They
There
probably
was
got off on it. They probably get off on it.
no, I
It's-
believe so. Yeah, yeah. There were definitely a couple of people, and I don't even remember names anymore. This is, you know, I'm 40 now, but I've gone on, you know, I've followed some Facebook pages and stuff, and people have remembered certain people who were just especially horrific, and they got off on it. They, you know, they wanted to hear the stories about you being raped and about you selling yourself for drugs, or, you know, it was just, and that was just another, I don't even know how much, you probably 80 grand for a 6-week program. And then you had to buy all the stuff. You had to buy the sleeping bag and the boots and the everything. I mean, it was just disgusting, the amount of money spent. And your parents aren't, you know, your family or whoever is funding it is none the wiser. Um, so Ascent, and I just have to say, I absolutely witnessed and experienced mental, physical, sexual, emotional abuse at all of the experience of all of the facilities that I attended within the Cedu family of services.
Okay. Let's go back to so you get transported to Cedu. Like, what do you remember about your first like day there, and then like walk us through like what you remember about your time at Cedu.
Um, well, the first day is probably the worst, I'd say. Um, you are strip searched vigorously, and you know, I think when I felt as an 11-year-old who didn't have anything to hide, you know, I wasn't at the point yet where I was doing drugs, sneaking out, stuff like that, which I don't mean, I'm not sounding like I'm better than anyone. It just, you know, for someone to think that I was crotching something was really hard for me to comprehend. So the fact that somebody wanted to do a vaginal search on me was traumatizing. The fact that it was done in front of male and female staff was traumatizing. It was done in front of other students. I was given 2 big sisters who were witnessed everything. So they were privy to all of my information. And they were only considered big sisters because they were on a higher level. There was obviously a tier system, a level system at Cedu. So they had done whatever requirements to be on a higher level than I was. Therefore, they were, you know, allowed to be little counselors or something. And, you know, then you have all of your belongings taken from you. Absolutely. Uh, you know, hair up in a hair tie, no makeup, no earrings, no nothing identifying. So, you know, you look generic. So a blank t-shirt, collared shirt, tucked in, khaki pants, belt, um, you know, shoes, general shoes, everything was from their commissary. Again, so your parents had to buy everything. You were given, so you had nothing from home. You were, and again, I was young, so I needed my teddy bear and I needed my stuff. I don't know. Having all that taken from you was very hard. I'd never been away from my family. My little brother was 3, and he was like, I was like obsessed with him. He was like a little my life doll. I just it was it was a lot to take in. You read all these rights and rules and given this long vocabulary list. They have their own language. All these rules. You're given a calendar, and you have every half hour have to have a staff sign one of the blocks, showing that you were where you needed to be and in compliance. And meaning that at that level that I had to be 15 feet from one person who was a level above me, and I had to be 15 feet from a building. I was not allowed to look at or to anybody on a different level. I could not look at, speak to, or speak about males. We could not sing. We could not say words like dork because it means a whale penis. Anything that was pop culture reference, we couldn't say. So any of those things would get you an X on your calendar. If you got 3 X's, you would be removed from school and you would do work detail. You were told that you would not be talking to your family. Well, pretty much you would talk to the first 2 months you're there, you don't talk to your parents on the phone. You get mail once a week and it's read by them. Your mail that you send is read. If they don't like what you say, they don't send your mail. If they don't like what your parents say, they don't give it to you, which is against the Constitution, actually. You can't withhold mail from anybody.
It's also, I believe it's a felony as well.
Yeah. I mean, those are your universal constitutional rights, even if you're in prison for, awaiting the death penalty, they can't withhold mail from you. So,
although maybe there was a loophole because we were so young. You know what I mean? I don't know, but I just thought of that. Maybe there was a loophole.
Yeah, I'm
you know
sure
what I mean?
parents signed over some like ridiculous amount of custody or something. I don't.
Totally too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there was something like that.
It was probably the contract. You're right.
It was some sort of contract, and I know my parents sure as shit didn't fight it. They didn't look into it.
Well, they probably didn't read the whole thing. A lot of people, most people, I don't usually read the fine print. I should. I'm trying to do more, but
I don't when I sign a cell phone contract, but when I send my 11-year-old daughter 8 states away, I do.
yeah, right.
I haven't been in that situation, but I'd like to think that I would. I can't. They also, your phone calls were monitored. You got 1 phone call a week for 15 minutes. If they didn't like what you were saying, they would take the phone out of the wall.
Did you have to wait a certain time before you got your first phone call?
Oh, yes.
Like, first got there, how long was it? Do you remember?
Well, it was actually based on behavior.
Yeah.
I think that waiting limit, acclimation period or something. And but then that was their first big threat. Actually the first thing they loved to take from you was wham, which was our once a week sugar. Like we got like a granola bar that we would like snort because it was sugar. And like you'd beat each other up for your wham. So that was like their first big doozy. Like, we're going to take your wham on Sunday. And then the second one was usually taking your phone call with your parents. And that was like, a bummer. So you know, they used these they broke it down, you know, I mean, they did these, and then what I didn't know until later were they were right before they had your phone call with your parents, they were calling your parents and saying, so this week Delaney was doing XYZ, and we really need you to tell her to start doing this and this and this, and or whatever, just coaching them. Or Delaney's going to tell you that somebody hit her, but she's just, her lying has gotten so out of control that we can barely control her, or whatever, you know, like they pumped them up and got them all ready for it. So by the time you got on the phone, your parents like, oh, here goes Delaney again, you know?
Yeah.
So it felt like a horror movie, like where the police, you know, you run away from the slaughterhouse and the police bring you back, you know, they're part of it too. The townspeople are in on it. Like there was never any getting away. Nobody.
Yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. No. Yeah, that's like in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the whole family was in on it. Mm-hmm.
I was exactly, and it was that way here, at least in, I think the reason they choose a lot of the locations they do, the rural locations up in Idaho.
Also, lack of regulations. States with lack of regulations. That's why they chose Montana, is because of its lack of regulation.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm surprised California got away with it, but I think they at least took advantage of the fact that they were up in Running Springs, which is literally like the tippy top of the San Bernardino Mountains. There's like one road in, one road out. So if you ran away, you either went through town, which gave you a 99.9% failure rate, or you went on the backside of the mountain, which was like rough, you know, I mean, just like wild wilderness. And those are your two chances. And if you went through town, you know, that's why they dressed us all the same. So people from town knew who we were. They would turn us in, take us back. If you got to town, school would have already called your parents and said, Delaney ran away again. She's going to be calling from a payphone. Keep her on the phone until the police get there. And you'd be calling your parents. And again, like talk about the betrayal and heartbreak. You're calling, begging for your life, telling them these things that are happening to you. And they're just, you know, placating you until the police come to take you back to hell.
Yeah. So, did you have, excuse me, did you have general meetings at Cedu?
Excuse me. They were all about meetings. Everything was a meeting. Yes. We were broken up into teams. So your team was your group of peers and then your group of counselors. So you had your team leader and then your team, and then it kind of was just a way to organize, I think, the students. But you'd have your team or the whole school would meet in the morning, and they do their announcements and, you know, your assignments and things based on your team. And there was a pretty much a requirement for physical touch. We had what was called a smush pile, and they talk a lot. I don't know if you've seen the Liam Chef, the Cedu documentary, but one of the clips or one of the videos is about the smush piles. And there was a rule that whenever we were in a meeting around, there was, I don't know, remember what they called them. There was a name for them, but we kind of just like, it was in this general area around kind of like a fireplace. When we were at that location, you had to be physically touching one person. So you know, and if you were a snotty brat, to them, you'd be like, like touch, like I'm touching someone, but the rest of the people were like super into it, and staff would be into it. So male staff would be like legs open, sitting on the ground with a female student laying between their legs, and they're like massaging her head, and there'll be a male, I mean, just, and that was just the rule when we had to get together. Then we would have smush piles where everybody had to be touching. Like it was like more than just grab a buddy and like snuggle up. It was like everybody together. And there was a lot of encouraging of physical, as much as there was a separation between, as much as they tried to pretend like they were keeping everyone separate, there was a lot of encouraging physical contact, and there was a lot of I think a big draw probably for the staff, because none of them were qualified. I've looked into it. None of them had any training. None of them, some of them had practically a GED. But the big draw was that you could restrain kids, and you didn't have to have a reason, and you could restrain. I mean, I think in hospital settings or in some states with regulation, there's a certain way you can restrain somebody or not restrain them. But here it was like no holds barred, like whatever, in whatever position for however long, in whatever, male, female. And I think that was where these people got drawn into it. And whether it was that, or we'd have these profits, which is were these, to move up again, like I said, in the levels and the ranks or whatever, you had to go to these profits, which were like workshops, maybe, I guess is the best way to describe it. And they were based on The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. And it was just these weird, and Synanon, if you know anything about the Synanon cult in the 70s in California, that's all what's Mel Wasserman, that's all what Cedu's based on. These prophets, we would have, you'd go in and there'd be a theme like your inner child, and the next one was like the brothers, and I can't remember some of the other ones. And you supposed to be a kind of like maybe like a trauma purging or something, and you'd go in, but they would have you, taking it'd start benign, beating a pillow, imagine that's your mom, you're so mad at your mom, beat the shit out of that pillow. And then it becomes you're in the center of the room covered with pillows, and all the kids are beating the shit out of the pillows on top of you, and you can barely breathe. And then it becomes, I remember one setting where we were sitting cross-legged, and we were holding a pillow to our chest, maybe not, but we had our arms crossed across our chest, and then we were like crouched down, with our head kind of like in our lap, and the staff were pushing on our backs, and they were like, feel the weight of whatever your issue was. Like some people were there for drug addict, you know what I mean? Like whatever they could throw in your face, feel the weight. And they would be pushing on you till you were screaming, either in pain or in emotional pain or physical pain, and that was just like totally okay there. Like nobody, I remember when I first got there, the first time I saw somebody put their hands on, well, I mean, I was restrained right away, but the first time that I saw somebody get physical, I was just like blown away. And then within a matter of weeks, it was just, I remember the next new person that came in who had their eyes wide like a deer, and I was like, oh, that ain't shit. Like they do that all the time. And it's just like, these are human beings. These are children.
Yeah, it's really messed up. Yeah, they used to do the same thing we would have these seminars, these self-help seminars, and then at the end of them, they'd be like these 2 or 3 day long things, and
Yeah.
and then fucking at the end of them, they'd have what they called the release process, and they'd literally have you beating the ground for like hours, literally hours. Like in Focus, I swear it was like 5 or 6 hours we were fucking beating the ground.
Yep.
It had to have been. The first one, it was like an hour and a half. The second one was like 3 hours or something like that, and the third one was like ridiculous. Like, so we did the same thing. It's interesting how the similarities. It's really interesting to hear the similarities between these places. They're different, but they're the same. Like they tweak, they like change the name. Like Inner Child you were talking about at the place I went is the Magical Child. They switch it from Inner Child to Magical Child. So they're just rewording. That's all they're doing is rewording. It's the same thing.
Right.
There's just crazy how many similarities there are. Did they have intervention there or like solitary confinement?
Yeah. Well, yes, they would have. You'd be put on what was it called? A project. And you'd have you'd be on bans from everybody, so you couldn't talk to, look at, speak, or be within 6 to 10 or 10 feet of anybody. You would do work detail all day. You had a little notebook that was all homework assignments, like write all your sins and what are your great, all these degrading, horrible things that then a staff member would read and jerk off. I'm sorry, but would read and give feedback on with their depth of breadth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't there wasn't like a room, there wasn't physical solitary, although no, I take that back. And this actually was something that I wanted to touch on, because I have not yet heard anybody not that I know all of everybody in the troubled teen industry or what they're talking about, but I have not heard anybody touch on the safe houses. And I don't know if that was just a Cedu thing or if that was in other places thing, but if it was just a Cedu thing, I know it wasn't just me. And anyway, so on campus, there wasn't any solitary confinement. But if you were deemed a threat or they didn't want to deal with you or whatever, you'd be sent to a safe house. And a safe house was essentially, literally, again, Joe Blow in town, who had a home, and you would go to their home, and they would watch you at their home for however long you needed to be there. And there was no regulations of these homes. So sometimes you get lucky and you'd get to somebody's house and they'd let you watch TV and eat Trix cereal, and they would be nice to you, and they had kids, and but most of the time they were extremely abusive. And they were allowed to be. There was nobody coming in and checking. There was nobody nobody believed you anyway. And so that was your confinement. You were taken out of school, out of the campus, and put in one of these homes. And I found myself in the home of Charles and his wife and his son. And he, from the moment I got there, I'm not sure if I struck a nerve or, but I remember talking to other students who didn't have the exact experience. But when I got there, I was handcuffed to the back of the toilet in the bathroom in the dark for most of the day. Obviously I was like, I'd go to the bathroom, but I had run away. That's why I was sent to Ascent. I ran away from campus 2 times, and or a bunch of times, but that was the Ascent issue. I couldn't keep my ass on campus.
Yeah.
And So they kept sending me to the safe houses. So Charles decided that I was a threat, so he would handcuff me to the back of the toilet, and then I would slowly be allowed to come out, and he would let me sit on a little like throw pillow like you'd have on your couch that was like this big, and he let me sit on it like in the corner of the room. And then eventually, if I was good and quiet, I could come in a little bit and watch a little bit of Price is Right. Is that the one with the wheel?
Yeah.
Is Right. And then if I was bad, things. And then his wife and his wife would go to work and his kid would go to school. And he took I don't know if it was a liking or a disliking, but he started sexually abusing me there. And I continued to act out at Cedu, and would be sent there. And it wasn't always a given that I would go to Charles' house. I don't know if he was able to maybe like request that I always came there, but he would tell me that I wanted the abuse from him. That's why I was acting out, so that I would come there. And when you're a kid, that fucks with your head, I was acting out for a zillion reasons, but the last reason, or obviously not a reason, but the last thing on my mind was to go to Charles' house. Unfortunately, that's what happened at the end of each time. And on my 13th birthday, for my birthday gift for becoming a woman, he raped me. And nobody cared, nobody believed me. I told the staff, no, whatever. And when I graduated from Cedu and I went home, I was so brainwashed. I actually came back to visit and see everybody about maybe 9 months, a year later. And I was standing in the I don't remember where I was standing, doesn't matter. But all of a sudden I got picked up in this bear hug from behind and like tossed in the air, and they're like, Delaney. And I turned around and it was Charles. And I was like, I can't even describe the emotion. And turns out they had hired him for his staff. So, I mean, just go, speaking to them, screening people, and, I, anyway, so the safe houses were their form of isolation. And I also think Ascent was a form of isolation.
Okay. Yeah, at the place I went, they would call it the Hobbit. It had a lot of names. The Hobbit, Intervention, the Hole. But they would
We had the Hole. I forgot.
yeah, it's okay. So it was essentially a room, just a padded room. They just throw you in there, and they just you just stand there. Somebody watches you, and you just stand there for days. I was there. I was in there 3 days one time, and like everything's like you can't. The windows are grated, and they have like a sheen over the windows, so like no sunlight gets in. And then like there's like padding along, and it's just pitch black in there. So by the time I got out, I couldn't even hold myself up. My legs like fucking like buckled from under me, like when they took me out after 3 days. So that's what we had at Spring Creek. Did you have anything? Cool. I know what you just said was it is a form of isolation, but did you have any like padded rooms?
No,
Okay.
no rooms. Though
Interesting.
no, surprisingly, though we would be sent to Loma Linda Psych Hospital a lot. That
Okay.
they had a bunch of, like, they really were lazy, and if kids were any kind of handful, they sent them off to other places, which I'm not sure if that happened in other places, or if that was also due to the fact that we were right outside LA. You know, we were rural, but we were an hour from the city, so they had a bunch of opportunities, you know, to get rid of us.
Yeah. Did you did anything happen when you went back and saw Charles, or did he like do anything to you then?
No,
Was it,
no, he was ecstatic to see me and thought I should be as well, and was very proud to be a staff. Um,
and he's definitely a sociopath.
oh, absolutely. I've you know, it's interesting because I've talked to other females that have been in the program around my time, and most of them experienced, I didn't experience any really physically sexual abuse from staff on Cedu campus. There was a lot of like psychological sexual abuse, if you can imagine, a lot of
Like recreate, like talking about what happened to you, and like did they make you do like reenactments and stuff like that?
absolutely, just
Oh, yeah.
you'd tell people your life story
Yeah.
and have to go into like all kinds of detail, and you know, so yeah, things like that. And then you'd be slut shamed, and you know, you'd be told you wanted it and you liked it and you deserved it, and just things that you know, really psychologically, you know, mess with you. And you have to also remember that were females who were prepubescent, you know. Yeah, they were prepubescent. These are 5th, 6th, 7th-year-old girls, and boys too, that were experiencing this. So for the rest of the females and males actually too that I've been in touch with, and sadly the few that are left alive, um, most of their sexual experiences were either perpetrated by other students or by the staff. Mine was by the safe houses and when I ran away.
Okay.
So
I'm curious if you know, would they only send was there like would they only send females to the safe houses, or would they send males there too? Because now I'm wondering if there was like if males were experiencing the same kind of abuse that you've described when they would go to safe houses. You see what I'm saying? I wonder if it was both ways, or if it was just
um,
just the
I
girls.
I know I know males were sent as well. Um, Sometimes it was the safe houses were used like in between while they were getting them ready to go to Ascent and
Okay.
stuff. Um, I don't know. I've not, like I said, I've not find, except for myself, whether it's just me being the only one talking about it or whether I was the only one who experienced it. I have not heard anyone else talk about the
Yeah,
abuse.
so this is the first time I've ever heard anybody, and I've watched documentaries on CDU too, and they're not even in documentaries, so it's,
Yeah,
it's awesome. Thank you for bringing that up, because I'm gonna ask people about those now. You know, because I'm extremely curious now. You know, for sure, like I want to know if it was happening to both males and females, and if you know, because and I also want to know how frequently. You know, it's just important information. You know.
I agree. It's absolutely part of the narrative, and I believe that it might be exclusive to the CEDU running campus, just logistically. Like I think each campus got away with whatever they could based on where they were and what, you know what I mean? I think that if each campus could have gotten away with a safe house, they would have, or something of the equivalent. You know, they were all sick and twisted in their own way. And um, you know, Cedu was able to pull it off. And so they did.
Because to me it just it rings like sort of like slave trading in a way, like because when you're at a place like you're pretty much a slave. Like you're stripped of all your rights, and then if you're sent somewhere else, you're pretty much traded to somebody else, right? For whatever they want to use you for, whatever. So, maybe they were getting kickbacks from these people, or
Well,
vice versa.
It had to be incredibly lucrative for the safe house, the homeowners, for Charles, you know, the you know and I've always wondered what was in it for the staff.
That's what yeah.
I have not stayed in touch. I did for a while stay in touch with some of the staff. I have not been able to, oddly, after my children were born. But I have, they're still around, and everyone's on Facebook, and there's always, 6 degrees of separation. I'm in contact with people who are in contact with staff, and that's none of my business, and that's their business. And but and they've all moved on to new jobs and have families, and the staff. And I just wonder, I'm like, what was the appeal? It was a huge,
yeah.
What was the benefit,
Or did they even know, or were they gaslit? Like, because there's also that too. Did they even know?
Right.
But because I'm playing devil's advocate here. But what if they didn't? But I'm like 90% sure they did. I'm 90% sure that they did know, and I'm 90% sure that there was some sort of incentive given, one way or the other.
I think that Running Springs itself, because it was such a small town, everybody had their foot in Cedu money in some way.
That's same with Thompson Falls, where the town next to where I went. Extremely small town, and it was in like massive debt, and then in like can't remember the exact year, but they were in massive debt, and this school opened up and provided jobs for damn near everybody there, and brought in a fuckload of income. And so essentially anything that happened on that campus, like they kind of turned the blind eye to it. Same kind of thing.
That's exactly, we went to the little small town, the little doctor in town, and
Same
that
here.
was it. And you'd go in and he'd be like, "Oh, how'd you break your arm?" And you're like, "Well, I got restrained and they snapped my arm by bending it back behind my back." "Oh, okay, well, that's a bummer. We're gonna cast it, but you should probably, go back to work labor later this afternoon." I don't know. That's a stupid thing. I don't even know where I went with that, but everybody had, was in the kitty. Everybody had their hand in the kitty.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Right next to Lake Arrowhead, which is a very, very fancy, bougie, expensive ski town, lake town up in it's like Lake Tahoe, I guess.
Like a resort type thing?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and we were right next door, and it was like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You'd be like, they would just drive you back to campus and drop you off.
Yeah, it's the craziest thing. I was wondering, so the first time you got sent to Charles's house, what did you even do to like merit like them sending you off, if you remember? And like, or like, do you remember like what you did like the majority of times that you get sent to these safe houses? Because I'm kind of wondering like what was so quote unquote severe that they were like, we have to, oh shit, we have to send you away now. Probably something that wasn't even that severe.
They really weren't. The things that were severe were taken care of other ways. Like I had a couple of significant suicide attempts.
Yeah.
The psych hospital and needed medical attention for a significant period of time. I went to Ascent the first time for trying to hang myself, which I think is funny, ironic. I don't know how you punish
Yeah.
somebody for, um, but, and I went to Ascent a second time because I ran away down the backside and I got stuck. And search and rescue, I was out for like 2 or 3 days, stuck in the snow, and search and rescue had to come and had to come and like get me off the side of the mountain, and it was a big fiasco and um, very humbling. And when I got back, they sent me to Ascent. So when it was big things like that, I was punished accordingly. Um, I would be sent to a lockdown facility. Loma Linda psych hospitals absolutely did have padded rooms. So I know what you're talking about when you're talking about those rooms. Um, and I know what hell, and I don't not sure. Um, I didn't mean to get off subject. I'm not sure if you guys were medicated, but we were
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, I was going to get into that. Yeah. Uh,
force medicated.
so did they, so, because what they'll either do, what I've noticed is that they'll either not like take you off your medications and not let you take any at all, or they'll oversaturate you with medication and make you into a zombie. So did they oversaturate you
Yes,
with
we
drug?
were
Okay.
absolutely zombies, like
They
trying
want
to
you like that. Yeah.
like held all and um I remember going out. I had a visit finally from my mom and my older brother, and we went out just into town for lunch. And I was so fucked up, like drooling and like shaking, knocked over my beverage at lunch, that my older brother, who was a teenager who doesn't notice anything except tits and ass, you know, he, he was like, there's like my sister's gonna die, like there's something really 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 wrong. And so they, we were just massively medicated, and that was just another private doctor who got his little palm greased, who didn't have any clue what was going on and didn't know how to treat any of us, but just wrote these prescriptions. And most of us would cheek them and trade them or not take them or do whatever. But then if we were caught, which I was because I was the youngest and I was stupid, they would crush them and we would have to take them crushed. And for example, I was on, remember being on Depakote, and it says specifically on the bottle, do not crush, because it's got a very, Depakote is almost impossible to crush. I don't even know how they must have had like a jackhammer, because the coating on Depakote is like this thick, because it's so bad on your liver and everything, that but they would crush that shit up every day and give it to me in water. And all my, I've been on every single med under the sun, and forced upon you, completely forced upon you. And but never, nothing appropriate, like I have, not that it's not obvious, but I have rampant ADHD, and I've had it my whole life, and undiagnosed. And um like they couldn't catch that, then they couldn't help me, I mean, um I had bipolar, but I was never on any mood stabilizers. It was just antipsychotics to knock you out. Held, like I said, held all lithium, uh, stuff like that, that just made you drool on yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so how long total were you in these places, like altogether?
2.5 years.
2.5 years? Okay. And did you graduate from them?
I did. I didn't graduate on the highest level, which, you know, um,
Are there 6 levels?
there was discovery, something. There's maybe 4 or 5.
Okay.
But each of them had, stipulations and requirements, and I just could not fucking win at Cedu. Like, you had a graduating class kind of when you came in. You were put with a peer group, and that peer group you would go through the profits, which were kind of like your seminars, and you'd go through them together, and then you'd graduate together. And they had graduations on increments, like they had every June. So you go with these people and they'd kind of be your peer group. And I was extended twice. I was supposed to graduate after, I don't know, short year and 3 months or something. And they kept extending it. And so I had two groups, peer groups pass me that I was a part of. And they went ahead and graduated, and I stayed behind. Um, and just like stupid stuff. Um, I just I could not conform. Essentially, we had to be robots. We had to learn to anticipate a sociopath's needs and desires before they express them, so we could, and I'm meaning the staff, we had to figure out what they wanted and needed or wanted from us before they said it, so we could embody that, become that, give them whatever response, whether it was true or not, and mask and be that person to survive, to get out of there. And if you didn't make it. You kept getting sent to Ascent. You would get sent to safe house, and I just couldn't get it. Eventually, I did to a degree, but I was always resisting. I always I could not get to the final point of, you really had to be a dirty dastard at the end. You had to sell your friends out. You had to, it was really all about, you had to step on everybody to get ahead. And there was just a point when I couldn't. And, but I was able to do enough to get out of there.
Okay. So let's talk about Ascent a little. Like, what do you remember about Ascent, and what did you do at Ascent? You essentially worked, right?
Ascent was all work, work labor and physical, like PT,
Okay.
like military, push-ups, jumping jacks, all kinds
Okay.
of that.
Okay. And what was the hardest part about being in these places for you, and how did you deal with it?
I want to give you, sorry.
Yep.
I think Ascent. Well, I went to Ascent 2 different seasons. Like, one was summer and one was winter. And I went to summer first, and essentially it's kind of a cool concept. In theory, it's all Native American based. So you live in, everything's in a circle. There's teepees. The circle is kind of to represent the circle of life. And but it's like military base. So, they yell in the morning and you've got to get up, and you've got 3 minutes for everybody to get dressed, pack their sleep sack, get their boots, drink their jug of water, get in formation. And if you don't, you start over and do it again. And then everybody's got to come out and do this. And if everybody doesn't it's back to square one. And it's the concept similar to the military. It's like build you up and then, or break you down. They just don't build you back up afterward, which that's what they forget to do. And Ascent then also sends out after you are at base camp. They send you out on a wilderness, like an excursion. So you go out with, again, a peer group, whoever you kind of came in with, and you go out. I'm pretty sure we were in Canada, but because you're way up on Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We were up by Ruby Ridge. So we were way up on the border of Canada, and you go up on these excursions. We had to make our own snowshoes, and like we have, massive backpacks. We 80-pound backpacks and walking miles and miles, and you build your camps. And this whole time it's supposed to be team building and morale boosting, and you have your little notebook and you've got assignments that you're supposed to be completing, and supposedly the guides, your staff are supposed to be counselors of some sort, and it's a rite of passage, essentially, is to complete. You have to complete that to graduate. So you go on, and there is a period there that they leave you for a couple of days by yourself with your own little tent and stuff to do your thing. And so that was, that's essentially the Ascent program. And both of the times that I went, I managed to push those in. I think there's 6-week programs, and I managed to push both of those into at least 8-week programs. So I was there for a while. The hardest part for me about all of it, or about Ascent and all, or just the Cedu experience in general, was, like I just said, the infidelity. I struggled with interpersonal relationships prior to going to boarding school. And then when you're there, you develop these incredibly intimate relationships with people. You live with your peers, female. So become like sisters. Everybody's life story. It's like a dorm. It's a family. And to have these people turn on you, even if or when that they're doing it because they need to do it to get out of there, it still was like devastating. And we would all promise each other, when we leave, we're going to come back and save each other, and no one ever did, because there wasn't any way to do it, but it still hurt. It just felt like everything was everything was a letdown. Everything was always a letdown. Everything was always being pulled from you. Everything you looked forward to was always taken from you. Like your birthday, we never got sweets ever. So your birthday, you got a birthday cake, and you got to pick the ingredients. And the big deal was the corner pieces, because obviously they have the most frosting and toppings and stuff. So all year long, people would grease you and try to be your friend so that you'd give them your corner piece. And especially around your birthday, they'd be chumming up to you trying to get their corner piece. And, it sounds stupid, but the day that I ran away, that I got stuck on the backside, I ran away over a corner piece of cake. And it's like a whole long drawn out story that's not worth getting into, but I was so hurt, not because I didn't get one, but the whole, you know, everything was so limited and you got so few joys and creature comfort that a human being, a child deserves, that you were so disappointed. Like I was at Ascent for Christmas when I must have been 11 or 12, and I still believed in Santa. I mean, by that point I didn't, but going into it, I did, you know? And so this is the first Christmas I've never been with my family. I have never had a stocking. You know, I'm a big crybaby. And for Christmas, they gave us, instead of just regular chapstick, we got us Smuckers or whatever, they're lip smackers, like some cute, you know, sparkly little chapstick. And you would have, I mean, you would have thought that we had been given keys to Mercedes convertibles. I mean, but the thing that sucked is that when it was gone, or when you lost it, or when some bitch stole it, like that was so upsetting because you didn't know, you know, it was a Christmas gift. When's Christmas coming again? Next year. So that's what was so hard, is that everything was so significant that when it got pulled from you, and that's what they were so sick of. They knew that. They knew that they could, like, oh, we're pulling your phone call. Oh, we're taking your candy this weekend. Oh, we're taking your this. Oh, we're taking your that. Just crushing you. Like, and you're just a kid. Like, it's just.
Yeah. So you'd say that's the hardest part?
I think looking back on it, because I have kids now, I don't know if you were to ask me before that, if maybe I would have had a different answer.
Okay.
But that's my answer now. Yeah.
Okay. Did you work kitchen ever there? Did you get to like work kitchen and like help make the food? Like, no? Okay.
No,
How
we,
was Go ahead.
oh no, we didn't. I'm sorry. At Cedu at Ascent, we, our food, we would pack in and pack out. So we would we would hike out to BCA or RMA, one of the actual campuses,
And then stock up?
and get the
Is there-
food for each meal and carry it with this kind of like, if you think of like a cooler with one person would have it behind their back, you know, holding two handles, and the other person behind them would have the two handles, and they'd carry like a big cooler. And it was a punishment when you'd have to do it because it was so heavy, and it would hurt, like blisters on your hands, and everyone was hungry. So it was actually a punishment when you had to pick up the food. But that's how they would do the food out there. Otherwise, we had kind of a mess hall, cafeteria type, because there was also the I don't know if I mentioned, there was the high school. Cedu had a high school as well, and it was on the same campus.
And so you like self-taught stuff, right?
Pardon?
Self-taught school?
We had teachers essentially, but I don't think any of them were qualified again.
They
And
wouldn't teach. They wouldn't teach, right?
no, and we were all put in one classroom, no matter your grade or your age or your abilities. When I came home, none of my credits transferred. So although I graduated high school by the grace of God and a lot of forgery probably, I don't really have like a continuous education past 7th grade because of Cedu. When I came back, you know, they were like, where's your algebra 1 and where's your this and that? And I was like, so I I squeezed as many as I could in before graduation, enough to graduate. And then I tried to go to college, and all the things that Cedu fucked for me. And I, I didn't have all these fundamental basics. Um, and among a zillion other areas of life that I didn't have fundamental basics from. But, our math and science, for example, our math and science class was combined. So we would we built, which is cool, we built a tall ship, like with blueprints and stuff, and that was our math and science combined. But I'm in middle school, so I need to be like actually doing math equations and learning a little bit of, science.
Okay. How was the food there?
Um, well, I'm a vegetarian. I'm a vegan now as a vegetarian. They did, so I didn't like, I didn't like their food. Um, I was heavy when I went there. I have been told, or I believe, or when you are abused as a child, it's common to put on weight.
It's the stress, anxiety. Yeah, right.
A lot of it's the stress, but some of it is to deter. You feel like you're deterring um, your perpetrator. You know,
Subconsciously, yeah.
yeah. If you feel, unattracted, uh, a lot of these I'm projecting from therapy things. So plus I was 11, so I was just, cute and chubby. But I was, persecuted before I left to Cedu at home. And then when I got to Cedu, I was kind of the dork. I was from Wisconsin. I hadn't had a drink yet. I hadn't done drugs. I hadn't had sex. I played with Barbies. A lot of the other kids were from LA and San Francisco, and they wore diamond earrings, and they were sleeping with their tennis instructor. And, they were just way cooler than I was, I thought. And so, my weight obviously it's an easy target. And the staff made fun of me. And so I actually developed a pretty significant eating disorder while I was there. And they loved it. The staff loved it. Instead of handling it appropriately and addressing it appropriately, I was applauded, and I was encouraged. And until it got to the point where it was medically dangerous. And then I was put on restrictions, which if you haven't met Lany yet, restrictions I don't do well with. But I would have I would have to show somebody my plate to make sure it was an adequate amount. And again, nobody's qualified. This is not a nutritionist, dietitian. This is just Joe Blow, who's a counselor there, who lives down, at the bottom of the mountain or something. I have to show my plate before and then afterwards. And if it wasn't enough, I have to sit there until I've eaten it. I was followed to the bathroom. I couldn't shower alone. Um, again, a lot of violations of privacy. Eventually, I was sent down again to Loma Linda to their eating disorder clinic to be on a feeding tube. And by the time I got back, it was pretty much forgotten about that it had been an issue. And I was just now skinny Delaney. When I graduated, I lost 85 pounds in about 6 months. Um, as a conscious effort, I consciously was so stressed and everything was so out of control in my life there. And there's nothing you can control, that the only thing you can control is what goes in your mouth. And I took full advantage of it. And, you know, it's ironic that people, you know, and I myself, I also became, uh, I am in recovery. So I also obviously struggled with addiction after I left Cedu. But both things were conscious choices. When I left Cedu, I was so numb and such a robot from learning how to be everything that they wanted to get out of there, that the only way that I knew how to acclimate to mainstream society, because they don't teach you that. They don't teach you how to go home and how to, you know, same with veterans. You know, I don't think that there's any comprehension of what life is like going home. Um, I worried about how I was gonna survive, and you know, so I was like, well, I'll just be heroin chic, and literally meaning like a skinny drug addict. And I went home when I was 14, and I sought out drugs and alcohol, and I continued to have an eating disorder. And you know, I fought for a very long time with a lot of self-defeating, self-deprecating behaviors because I was so numb from everything from Cedu that I don't know how I'm one of the few who managed to survive. I think probably, I'm bad with math, but I'd say 80% of the people I went to school with are not here with us anymore. And I just, you know, I wonder how, with all that deliberate action, deliberate thought, with all that time to sit and learn and be forced to learn these negative behaviors, how I managed to survive. A lot of
Okay.
survivor's guilt.
I feel that. What's the craziest thing you saw there when you were there? And it can be more than one thing, but what was like the craziest things you saw when you were at Cedu or at Ascent?
Um,
Or like the worst thing?
well, let's think. It was very traumatic. Like I said, at Ascent, the boy was being restrained and they snapped his arm. So I'm not, I don't, I'm bad with camera angles. Like, I don't know if you can see, but so his arm was kind of bent, you know, back, kind of like a police officer would be bending your arm behind your back. And, but then all of a sudden his wrist, like that's back here, was like up over his head. So, you know, he snapped his arm and then his arm was like up over his head. And he continued to restrain him and his arm was just like flopping. And the kid was screaming like this sort of scream, that a very sick scream, like I and he was screaming for his mom. And that really got, it gets to me now. Again, like I said, since I'm a parent, bugs, that stuff bugs me more. um and then he was held down for probably a couple of hours on a broken arm, like shattered, like elbow had to have been just like shattered. And the whole time he's screaming in pain. And then eventually he just was like quiet, you know? And that they finally got him up and took him into town for medical care. And he came back, I think the next day. I think he was in the hospital overnight. And he came back the next day and he was in like an arm cast from like his under his shoulder to his wrist. or no, well, like his hands were like popping out. And we used to have to cut lumber, like big, huge, massive trees. And we'd use this like old fashioned like lumberjack saw where you'd have two people on each side and you like manually saw the logs into little pieces. And then we'd make cords and we'd stack them up into cords and all this stuff. So he's got this, you know, shattered arm that probably should have been operated on and pinned, and was given probably no medication. And the next day he's back and they have him sawing again. And that was horrific to see. I've never watched somebody be hurt like that and not have like immediate reaction of affection and like worry, you know. Like I've seen my older brother was a soccer player, and one time somebody got kicked in the leg and like something knee went the wrong way or something gross, but people like went running and like helped him and were like, oh my God, you know, like an appropriate reaction. I've never seen, and still to this day, I've never seen somebody witness, let alone do that, hear that reaction from somebody. I mean, it sounded like an animal shrieking. And this is like a 28-year-old man holding on a child. I mean, I don't think I could comprehend anything at the time, but it sat with me now, obviously, for, let's see, 30, probably 30 some, 20 some years. I just had a lot of the horrific stuff, to be honest, has been since leaving, and some of the stuff that has happened to the people that I have known since they've left, and some of the life experiences they have been pretty traumatic. You know, going through all of this with these people being family, like I said, both male and female, you know, you really do get attached to these people. Hearing about people in jails, institutions, and death is very hard to deal with, and the guilt and the blame, the shame is heavy. I work with a therapist. I finally have found a qualified therapist. I have a diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a little bit different than regular post-traumatic stress disorder. And I finally found a qualified therapist. And so we're working on a lot of this stuff, which is why maybe I'm mentioning some of the stuff that I'm mentioning. And I definitely don't have anything figured out at all, but trying to process some of this stuff and how it's affected me. And a lot of it I never realized. I'd like to think that everything stopped the day I graduated, you know, and I left that place, and it didn't. And it continues to affect me every day. And every time I've gotten a call or an email or something about somebody that I went to school with, you know, it just opens up all the things again.
For sure, for sure. I am gonna want to go into a little bit of course, after you got out of the program. I just have a few more questions for you here. So if you could go back in a time machine and not go through either of those places, or either one or the other of those places, would you do it, and why?
You know, I thought about that so many times, and without thinking about it, my gut says no, I would not, or yes, or wait, I I would, or yes, I would do it again.
Yeah.
Um, I would not. I have some amazing friends, um, like amazing people in my life because of that. Um, I am who I am because of that. And I also, I really truly believe in the butterfly effect. Um, I'm kind of an old hippie. If none of that happened, I wouldn't be here today. My kids wouldn't be here. I would never trade my kids um, for anything. And I hope that they would never trade me with all my baggage, you know, for anything. And I also, um, I work in recovery and mental health, and I pray every day that I help at least one person in my life, and that makes all of this not in vain. And that's why I'm here today, because I appreciate so much what you are doing, and everyone who's working on this is doing. And so no, I wouldn't change it. I think that I believe people are kind of like a tapestry. Your whole life is a tapestry, and some people have a lot of texture in theirs. And I think mine is very textured. And but I also think that with or without Cedu, I was going to make texture. That's just who I am. And I might not have made it out uh, the other side with all the texture I was going to make. Again, um, I feel guilty for being alive sometimes with my friends who didn't make it through Cedu, but I made it for a reason, and I'm here to um, be stronger because of it and help other people. So I probably wouldn't
Okay.
change.
Okay. Um, at Cedu, probably I obviously not at Ascent, but at Cedu, did you have a library at all that you could go and like rent books from or anything like that?
No. Oh, yes, but it was highly um filtered.
Yeah.
We also didn't have we couldn't listen to the radio.
Yeah,
We
neither could
couldn't listen to, obviously we didn't have TVs, magazines, um, internet. So when I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but when I came out, I was in like I come out of a bomb shelter. I didn't know anything pop culture related. I didn't know um anything that had happened. I went from VHS when I went in to DVDs when I came out, and um, the only music we could listen to was John Denver and shit that had to do with those stupid prophets, and um, it was all brainwashed. I mean, everything for as dumb as they were with hiring, and all these stuff. Everything else was very thoughtful and thorough.
Yeah.
If you were to go through the library, like what was there was handpicked.
Yeah. Okay. I just asked because for me, we had a library at the place I went to. It was filtered, but there was like a few like occasional books that you could find like that the staff just hadn't read, so they didn't know that there was some like fantasy like sexual stuff in there, and like like there was some like pretty violent like there was Terry Goodkind there, which is a fantasy author who writes like fantasy books. And I remember I got really, really into that series. But it was like there was some fucked up shit that happened in that book. Like there was people being tortured and stuff like that, and they just hadn't read it. So we got. But yeah, I remember that being a really big escape for us was at night when we had to be quiet in our bunks and like you weren't supposed to read, but everybody did it, and you just read and like you'd literally got like be transported to that place in the book instead of where we were. So
It's amazing. That's like a different world. I was locked up for quite a while, and books were my outlet.
yeah, definitely. Um, how's your relationship with your family? Have you told your family how this has affected you? Obviously, not your stepfather or anything like that, and probably not your mom, but I was going to ask, like, how's your relationship with your family? Have you tried telling them how this has affected you? And obviously not your stepfather, but your mother, like, do you think you could ever forgive your parents? My thing is, like, I've forgiven my parents, but I'm never going to forget what they did to me, like, period. Like, I'll forgive you for it, but I'm never going to forget it. So, like, where are you at with your parents?
Um, I I don't know. You know, to be honest, I don't know that my mom's ever asked for forgiveness. So I can't really offer, I can't really extend forgiveness to somebody who doesn't want it or doesn't, do you know what I mean?
And they need to
Um,
acknowledge that it happened too.
she does, you know, but it's all about her. You know, when we talk about it, it's like, oh, I'm such a bad mother. I didn't know any better. I was doing the best I could. It's just about her. Um, it's never, I guess I don't know how it should be. But she's never asked for an apology or she's never extended an apology.
Yeah.
She's never asked for me to an apology. She's never offered an explanation. Um, the same as with the abuse. It's just kind of an unspoken, it happened. Delaney is who she is because of it. However, saying that, um, I struggled a lot after Cedu. And my family I don't think wanted to admit that Cedu had abandoned it, because then they maybe had to admit that they had to look at themselves. But there was a lot of money spent on me, for like trophy treatment centers and things like that. And I think a lot of that was like an effort to buy my forgiveness.
Okay.
Uh, there's been a lot of things like that that have happened. My family is very passive. I don't have any relationship with my family anymore. Um, I, my boundaries are very strong and very clear, and my family has not made the choice to get with the times and get healthy. And so, I have two kids that are healthy and need healthy, and we don't do toxic. So, um, you know, they're not, they're not making life any better for us. So, yeah, and if I think about it, really, I don't know that it, first, I don't know if it would, first of all, I don't know that I would believe my mom if she were to apologize. And second of all, I don't know what it would matter. And I don't mean that to discredit your question at all. I
Yeah.
just thinking to myself, you know, if by this point, if she hasn't, you know, the things she's done in the 20, 30 years or whatever that's passed has shown me that she does not have remorse for it.
Okay. Did you have like profits, I guess they would be called, at your place, where you would like go to them and see your parents? Like at the place I went to, we had PC1, PC2, and PC3, which is Parent-Child Seminar 1, 2, and 3. And PC1 is essentially the very first time that you actually get to see your parents since you got there, which for me it was like over a year. And but yeah, did you have anything like that there?
We had rose ceremony, which were, we saw our parents before those. Like we had visits prior, not prior to that event, but earlier in the program. I'm sorry you had to wait a whole year. That's intense. But we had the rose ceremonies, which our parents also had to go through, like mini profits, kind of similar to what we did. And then when our parents kind of like graduated from their brainwashing, we all had a rose ceremony. And then that was like, if you made it to rose ceremony, you were going to graduate. And that, yeah, so I guess that was really it. It wasn't much more than that.
Okay, and did you have a graduation ceremony like the place I went? They had something called Trail of Lights, where essentially when you graduate, you're blindfolded the entire day, and you have to like trust you have a buddy. Whoever's graduating essentially is blindfolded for the entire day, and they're led around by like people will be like, hey, over here, and you have to follow people's voices. And back before I got sent there, you had to hike up an entire mountain and get to like this summit blindfolded by just following people's directions. But anyways, at the end of the day, essentially you fall back, and then the song you choose is played, and then you're like crowd surfed down to the end, and then people come around and tell you how much you helped them through the program or whatever. Did they have anything like that where you went?
No, no. Well, Ascent, something like that. They did like a Native American ceremony with a you had like a what was it called? Like a like am I thinking? What are those? Dream catcher, like a circle with different like hemispheres, and that had different significance. And maybe no, they weren't. It wasn't a dream catcher. It was like directions: north, east, west, south, north. And you would put somebody at each, because they had significance, and you'd go through the compass essentially, like you had to complete the compass to graduate from Ascent. And so you put somebody on each of the directions, and then a staff member, I think, would also stand, and you had I think it was a piece of wood or something, and they passed it between each person, and each person who you chose to stand on those corners would say something to do with that significant direction as far as your growth and your thing. And then you would take that feather and that rock or stone or stick or whatever with you when you graduated. The Cedu graduation was much more formal. You chose a escort, which was one of your peers, which was a fight all the time, and you chose a staff escort, and they played music, and you walked down this big aisle, and it was the first time you got to wear a dress and makeup, and that's all anyone cared about. And you stood on stage and your staff would talk for a second, you would talk for a second, and then you would run and jump in your car because you're afraid your parents were going to punk you and leave you there. I mean, you know, it was like that. It was surprisingly not abusive.
Okay. And is it your opinion, or hold on, that's the last question. So let's get into after you got out of the program. So you said you struggled with abuse and stuff like that, or I mean, addiction. So walk us through like what happened after you got out of the program.
Well, I got out, and I had left when I was in 7th grade, and I came back my sophomore year of high school. So that's like a big jump.
Yeah.
You know, and I missed so much socialization. If you think about, you know, everything that happens at middle school is like really a big deal, you know, and you know, puberty happens and like all these firsts and stuff, and you're supposed to do it with your friends, and you're supposed to have all your awkward moments out of the, you know, by your sophomore year, you're kind of like a little bit grown up. And I came back, and first of all, nobody knew where I had gone because I was at school one day, next day I was gone, and I was gone for 2.5 years, and nobody heard from me. And so I came back, and it was the school, Cedu was very smart, and they usually linked people up with another school. And they were like, oh God, you better send your kid to another school after, you know, they shouldn't go home after this. But I wasn't having that. And I don't know why I'm very surprised that my parents didn't send me someplace else. They let me come home. They let me go back to public school. Very surprising. Not surprising circumstantially with what was going on with my mom and my stepdad and stuff. But anyway, so I went back essentially to high school of all the kids that I had left earlier, which was a bad idea, but that's what I wanted, but you don't listen to your kids. Um, so I came back and just showed up all of a sudden at school one day, and, you know, have been gone for 2.5 years, and I'm half the size that I was, and nobody knows where I was. And so I just loved it. And I got to act like the badass that I never was. And because I had learned all this at Cedu, I'd learned how to have no emotions. Nobody could bully me or phase me. Nothing scared me. I wasn't afraid of getting in trouble. I could skip school and smoke weed in the parking lot and nothing but, you know, like I was just a cool cat. And I had this allure because I don't know, and I just loved it. And I didn't have any emotions, and I thought that was great. But what I didn't realize was that you have to have emotions to function. But I couldn't, I had made such a disconnect at Cedu to survive between my head and my heart. Like I logically knew I loved you, but like I physically couldn't feel those emotions. Um, uh, so I started using and to feel stuff, you know, and I have, you know, genetically again like the bipolar, I have predisposition to AODA issues. So I think that you know was love at first sight, and that took off instantly. And also I didn't give two shits. Like what I had just been through, nothing scared me. Um, you know, what kids were doing versus what I wanted to do, and what kind of adrenaline rush I needed, and what kind of attention I needed were not on par with each other. So I never fit in again. I still didn't fit in, but not for the same reasons. Um, I have an older brother who's 22 months older than I am. He was in a boarding school locally, but a college prep school. So not like what I went to, but more like to get him into a good college. So he is a year ahead of me. So my sophomore year, he was a junior. So his friends in his boarding school had already gone to college, and I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. So there's a big university. So we had friends, both of our mutual friends were already in college, freshman and sophomore at the UW. So I was like, fuck high school. You guys are a bunch of dweebs. And I started partying um, down at the college. And I just had this incredible threshold for adrenaline. And it wasn't even adrenaline, I'd say, because I couldn't even get aroused. Like I would get in trouble. Like I lost my license before I was even 16, and I remember getting pulled over driving without my license, under the influence, all kinds of stuff, and everyone in the car's freaking out, and I was just like completely like unfazed. And so it wasn't like that was like an adrenaline rush. So I don't know. I still have to, I guess, figure that out. But I lived on the edge. I didn't give a fuck about living or dying. I felt guilty for all my friends who had died at Cedu. Um, my best friend died when I was 15, and that was really hard. Then I really got into stuff heavy, bounced around to a bunch of schools. My mom didn't care what I did. I could go out for 4 days and not come home, and she didn't care. I never had to account to anybody. Um, like I said, I was able to get through school. I don't know how, but I did. I graduated high school. I went out to college in Santa Barbara. Um, got into meth pretty badly out there. Um, dropped out of college to get away from meth. It wasn't here in the Midwest yet. So I moved back here. I got 2 DUIs before I was 18. Um, went out to California to get sober. Went to rehab a couple times. I got sober when I was 19. Um, lived in California for quite a while, and I was sober out there for 5.5 years, and worked in recovery, worked at some of the rehabs that I had gone to. Was doing well. Um, got slammed with my bipolar, kind of ran rampant, and then uh, I uh, my grandmother passed very, very close to me, and I relapsed, and I got my third DUI, and I assaulted an officer who had I have big I very I'm very weird about my space, obviously, after being restrained and having some of the stuff happen to me. So I don't like people I don't like being hugged. I don't like being touched without my permission, and a lot of conditions surrounding it. So my third DUI, I hit a parked car, and my car was on fire, and they were trying to get me out of the car. And I didn't want, I wasn't under arrest. I mean, they were just worried about getting me out of the car, and they were holding me by my arm, and I flipped out. And so I started assaulting the officer. And so I got a whole bunch of charges and spent a good time in jail. Um, I spent 2 years in T.T.I, which is a Wisconsin women's prison, and came back and finally got sober, real sober, started, got back to school, uh, met my first husband in recovery, had my first son. My husband passed actually 6 years today. Sadly, he died. He was not honest about his recovery. So I always recommend everybody be honest about your recovery. One day at a time, you always can come back. He hit it and he's not here today. And then I have another son. I have a 4-year-old son. So I have 2 little boys. And I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. Did you ever struggle with heroin?
I did for a little period of time.
That was my DOC. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, well, when I relapsed, mine were mostly uppers. Alcohol has always been my drug of choice. Alcohol, weed, and uppers typically. But when I relapsed, after my grandma passed, I was doing, I mean, just like being a garbage can, just like totally gross, anything, everything. And the day actually that I crashed my car, I had been on a bender for like 3 days. And actually, my girlfriend, not friend anymore, but she admitted this to me probably she actually wrote me in prison apologizing. I think that was when she told me, but we had been partying, and I guess I tried to convince her to shoot me up with some dope, and she did, and I OD'd.
Like heroin?
Yeah.
Okay.
And and they put me in the bathtub. Somebody had Narcan. I snapped back out of it, wanted to do a bunch more, and just continued drinking and doing a bunch of ecstasy and coke for like 2 more days, and then drove my car into, luckily, I mean, to another, I mean, not luckily, but I, crashed into another car, engulfed in flames, and managed to be pulled out of it. So luckily, being that's the luckily part is my addictive personality. I should be an opiate addict, and I'm not, and I am so blessed.
For sure. Was shooting up like your thing? Like, did you do shooting up a lot, or was it just that one time? Because I got into, I started with smoking, and it took me a really long time. I was one of those people too that I was like, I was one of those people, just textbook like that'll never be me. Da, da,
Right.
da, da, I'm afraid of needles. Da, da, I'm still afraid of needles, but it doesn't matter. You can be afraid of needles and still shoot up. It doesn't
Right.
stop me from. So I'm just wondering, was that your way of using, or?
No, I'm a snorter. I snort everything.
Okay.
Snort it or smoke it. Um, but oh yeah, that would be, I think, my issues. It's also hard because I'm on so many prescription medications. Now that I mean, like I'll be California sober, I smoke weed, but the amount of meds that I'm able to stay off by just smoking weed, I think that's my life, my body.
I smoke weed too.
You
I
know,
saw. So I do.
I think that, I have, that's a whole other conversation, and choice for everybody. But I have such bad ADHD that I think that I tend towards uppers to balance me out. Um, and I've always been a like a adrenaline seeker. Like I'm very much um impulsive, you know, like adrenaline junkie. So I've always done things that make me crazy and impulsive and irrational, and appeal to that dopamine seeking portion of my brain.
For sure. You said you live in California now?
I'm back in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. Okay. You're from California.
I'm from Wisconsin. I was in California, and now I'm back in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. 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 Cool. Well, I have one more question for you. Is it your opinion that these places could or even should or even could be fully regulated at this point, or is it your opinion that they should all just be shut down, the ones that are still running right now?
They all need to be shut down. I do not believe that there's any therapeutic value in removing a child from their home.
Okay.
That in itself, and I could go on in 1,000 other reasons why, but that in itself, unless the child's a danger to themselves or others, you don't remove a child from their home. And if they're a danger to themselves or others, there are so many interventions way, 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 way before this that I don't see any excuse for this, except for people who want to get rid of their kids. You know, I mean, I went to school with, like, I'm not name dropping, but there are a bunch of celebrity kids there, and I just know their parents didn't give a fuck and just wanted to get rid of them. I know a bunch of kids there who weren't like me, who weren't bipolar and weren't a handful and weren't doing drugs, who just, I don't know. It's no parent. If you're a parent, you signed up for this. You don't get to just sign on the dotted line and ship your kid away.
Yeah.
You sign, you figure it out. Not
Yeah.
you figure it out. If you can't do it, then you find somebody else who can help them. And you don't just turn a blind eye and turn your back. I will never, ever, ever doubt my children. I will never doubt them.
Yeah.
And I just imagine any of our parents, any of us who've been through this cumulative us, this big aching, bleeding us, that any of our parents had the fucking nerve to not believe us.
For real. Okay. I thought of a few more things. Do you still have a little bit more time?
Yep.
Okay. When you were at Cedu and/or Ascent, did you ever witness or hear about any staff giving any of the students like drugs or anything like that, or doing drugs, or being like high on shift? Like, did you notice any of that? Like,
I think that the staff at Ascent, Jamie, was one of the staff specifically at Ascent that had to have been on some sort of like either roids or meth or something. He was just like the rage and just the rage. But otherwise, no, I think they were high on control and power. I do have a funny story. My best friend, oops, shit, I did that again. My best friend went to Ascent with a pretty serious gal, and she was at the middle, my friend was at the middle school with me, and this other celebrity was older, considerably older. Like we were 12 and she was 18, and she got my friend. She convinced her at Ascent that if you smoked goat weed, that it would get you high. So they all got in trouble in the TVs for smoking goat weed, and with this celebrity, it's on its podcast. I'll send it to you. It's pretty funny. She goes into this whole long story about it. So that's the only that's drug use, but there was that, and then like I said before, people would cheek their meds and trade them with each other, snort them, stuff like that.
okay. And did you ever, I was gonna say, I made acid out of orange peels and toothpaste when I was at Spring Creek. Yep. And then
I
I also cheaped my meds and snorted them, and it turned out to be acne medication. It did
oh,
nothing for me. It just made me break out. It made me break out. Like it did the opposite. It was horrible.
that's awful.
Yeah.
I'm
Um,
there yet in my life, you know. I was the goat. Like they always would have me cheek my meds for them. I didn't, I just wanted to play Barbies in color.
did they make you do the whole like shit?
Oh yeah, like
Meds, like, how would you do it? Like, where would you put them? Like, would you put them like underneath your jaw or?
well, I've been bulimic for such a long period of my life that I can put things. I mean, they're essentially like on the back of like underneath your tongue, but down a little bit. Like it sounds gross, but kind of like when you clear your throat,
Yeah.
you're like kind of clearing your throat a little bit. It's like that. It's like that little pocket right underneath your back of your tongue, essentially.
Okay.
So, and they'd always, I didn't have any desire at that age or know anything about anything. And I just wanted to be cool. So you know, that was my in
Yeah.
with the cool kids. But then they started crushing them. And I would say that there's probably a large likelihood that some of the medical issues that I have today are a result of that.
Yeah. There's a large opportunity that is correct. um, did you ever like when you were there? Was there anybody that killed themselves in the program? Committed
Yeah,
suicide? Yeah.
not on campus. No,
Okay.
actually, that's not true. Um, it wasn't. Cedu had a middle school program, and they had a high school that was completely separate, but it was on the same campus. There was right before I came, so that would have been 97. I think it was the Christmas of 96. We had a pit, like you said, a pit, but that's where they would put people to sleep. So they were monitored 24 hours, but she managed to slit her wrists. And I did not, they didn't get her medical care in time. We were on the top of the mountain. I don't think that they got her down to Loma Linda or San Bernardino in time. I wasn't there on campus at the time.
Okay. And did you ever hear about any staff like on like at Cedu like getting sexual or inappropriate with any of the students or any students getting inappropriate with the other students?
Oh
Was,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I
I
actually.
know I know you said the like that, but
Yeah, no, I actually have a friend, a peer who on two occasions um was taken. She essentially was they thought maybe pregnant twice by a staff member that she had a long term relationship with. Everybody kind of knew about it. Nobody knew the extent of the sexual relationship, but it was kind of like teacher's pet. Um, they were way too chummy. She got preferential treatment. It was a very uncomfortable. Everybody was uncomfortable by their relationship. Um, so there was definitely, that sort of stuff. There was definitely um, stuff happening between students. I know there was more, I would say, same sex stuff happening just because logistically it wasn't very easy for opposite sex to hook up. Um, uh, Another funny, stupid celebrity had sex in the boys' dorms and they knocked the sink off and it like flooded the dorm. flooding down the hill, and it was really funny, you know. And I again, I was pretty young. I didn't know what was going on. So no, it was all puberty. I had my period when I was there, and I didn't have anyone to talk to, or I didn't know anything, you know. If I'd had sex with somebody there, I would not have known about protection. I wouldn't have known if I had gotten pregnant. Like, you know, I mean, playing with fire, you know, you can't be sexually abusing a bunch of prepubescent anybody, but
It's messed up. Okay.
yeah, it was just a weird, very weird dynamic. We had night staff too that were, again, random Joe Blows that they had their little night staff room, and they would do rounds, and they would come around and like shine a flashlight, make sure we were all in there. And one of them was a guy, and that was always creepy.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to have night staff too.
Yeah.
I actually got in trouble one time because I was hella hungry and the night staff had a sandwich, and I asked him, hey, can I have that sandwich? And he's like, he gave it to me, and then I got a category 4 the other day because I fucking insubordination, because I manipulated him into giving me the sandwich, and then they're like, we can either give you insubordination for manipulating him for the sandwich, or we can give you a cat 4 for having inappropriate items. Theft. Or we can get you for theft because even though you asked him for it. But yeah. So that happened. But
that's just breeding such, I mean, that's just the brainwashing. Like, you have to outthink, you have to like learn to think on the spot right there, you know, and that's what's so unhealthy. That's all the years of undoing, you know, that you go through therapy to try to undo thinking like that, you know?
yeah, it's really messed up. Well, is there anything more you want to add, or that you want people to know about your experience there? Or maybe that you want to tell a parent that may be thinking about sending their kid to a place like this?
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate anybody who takes the time to listen. I hope that it's either informative or supportive. And to any parent who is considering or looking for information, please speak to a survivor. We're not going to try to talk you out of it. We just would like to have you hear some points of view. It's a business. It's a big business, and you would do your research on anything else. Do your research on this.
For sure. And would you ever be willing to do a follow-up episode sometime in the future just to check up on you, and maybe if you think of anything that you forgot about?
I'd love to, absolutely. I have some things I'm gonna email or get to you that I talked about, that if you'd like, just to articles or pictures or things that I can send you. But I'd love to talk again, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Take care. Good luck.
Yep. And thank you guys. If you haven't liked the video so far, make sure that you like the video. I appreciate all of your support. And yeah, we will catch you guys on the next one. Bye.